The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Dominion Council chamber sparkled with lights from 12 different star systems. Inside, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a floating table that could hold the weight of mountains. Each seat represented an empire that ruled over hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. Admiral Korath slammed his four-clawed hand on the table. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. His red eyes burned with anger as he stared at the small hologram floating above the table. The image showed a blue and green planet spinning slowly in space. "This is Earth," he growled. His voice was deep and scary, like rocks grinding together. "A nothing world full of primitive creatures who barely know how to fly between planets." Emperor Thex leaned forward in his golden chair. He was the leader of the council and the most feared being in the galaxy. His silver skin reflected the lights around him as he spoke. "Tell us what happened, Admiral." Korath stood up. He was 9 feet tall, and his body was covered in thick armor that looked like it was made from black metal. "We sent the usual envoy, shipped to Earth 3 days ago. Captain Zelos delivered the standard message: join our empire or be destroyed. Simple." The other council members nodded. They had done this thousands of times before. Most planets surrendered immediately when they saw the power of the Dominion. Those who refused were crushed like insects. "The humans listened to our message," Korath continued. "Then they did something no one has ever done before." "What did they do?" asked General Vex. She was a tall, thin creature with 6 arms and bright blue skin. Her voice sounded like music, but her eyes were cold as ice. They laughed. The council chamber fell silent. No one had ever laughed at the Dominion's demands. Before. Fear, yes. Anger sometimes. But laughter? Never. "They laughed at us," Korath repeated. "Then they destroyed our envoy ship with a single shot. Our sensors couldn't even track their weapon. One moment the ship was there, the next moment, it was space dust." Emperor Thex's eyes narrowed. "One ship does not make them strong. Perhaps they got lucky." "That's what I thought too," Korath said. "So I sent a scout fleet of 5 ships to investigate. Only one came back. The pilot was half crazy with fear. He kept saying the same thing over and over." "What did he say?" "He said the humans were ready for them. He said they knew exactly when our ships would arrive and where they would come from. He said it was like walking into a trap that had been waiting for years." Commander Zeta spoke up from her seat near the window. She was from the ice worlds, and her breath created small clouds in the warm air of the chamber. "Admiral, you're talking about humans like they're some kind of threat. Our databases show they only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. They have maybe a dozen colonies and a few hundred ships at most." "That's what our data says," Korath agreed. "But our data might be wrong." Emperor Thex laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Admiral, you're letting fear cloud your judgment. These humans destroyed 2 small groups of ships. So what? We have crushed entire star systems that fought harder than that." The other council members started talking among themselves. They spoke in different languages, but they all said the same thing. Humans were weak. Humans were primitive. Humans would fall just like every other species that had dared to challenge the Dominion. "I propose we send the standard punishment fleet," said General Vex. 50 ships should be more than enough to handle one primitive world." "Make it 100 ships," Emperor Thex decided. "We want to send a message to the rest of the galaxy. No one refuses the Dominion and lives." Korath wanted to argue, but he knew better. The council had made their decision. He bowed his head and accepted his orders. "It will be done, Emperor. The punishment fleet will leave tomorrow." While the council made their plans, something was happening in a star system far away. Earth looked peaceful from space. White clouds swirled over blue oceans. Green and brown continents rotated slowly in the sunlight. It looked like any other inhabited planet in the galaxy, but looks could be very deceiving. Deep inside a mountain, on Earth's moon, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in front of a wall of screens. Each screen showed a different part of space around Earth's solar system. Her uniform was simple and black, with no fancy decorations or medals. She was not tall or scary like the alien leaders. She looked like an ordinary human woman with short, gray hair and tired eyes, but her eyes were not really tired. They were the eyes of someone who had been planning and waiting for a very long time. "Report," she said quietly. Major Rodriguez stepped forward. He was a young man with dark skin and serious expression. "The Dominion Council has decided to send a punishment fleet. Our agents confirm 100 ships, standard configuration. They'll arrive in 72 hours. Chen nodded. "And our preparations?" "All. Colonies report ready." The Mars shipyards finished the last batch of ghost ships yesterday. The asteroid belt defense platforms are fully armed and hidden. All personnel are at their stations. Chen walked to the main screen. It showed Earth hanging, in space like a blue jewel. It looked so small and helpless. The Dominion had no idea what they were about to face. Major, send a message to all human colonies. Tell them it's time. Rodriguez saluted. Yes, Admiral. Shall I use the standard code? No, Chen said with a small smile. Send it in clear text. It doesn't matter if they intercept it now. Tell every human ship, every human colony, every human station in the galaxy. The time for hiding is over. Show them what Earth really is. As Rodriguez sent the message, Chen thought about the long road that had brought them here. For over 100 years, humanity had played a careful game. They had pretended to be weak and divided. They had hidden their true technology and their real capabilities. They had let the galaxy think of them as primitive newcomers who were barely worthy of notice. It had been the hardest thing any species had ever done, watching other worlds fall to the Dominion, seeing billions of innocent beings enslaved or killed, pretending to be helpless when they had the power to help. But it had been necessary. They needed the Dominion to underestimate them completely. Now, that time was over. Chen touched a button on her command console. Across the solar system, hidden sensors came online. Stealth fields that had been active for decades began to power down. Weapon systems that had been disguised as mining equipment started to reveal their true purpose. The asteroid belt, which looked like a normal collection of space rocks, began to change. Massive shapes emerged from what had seemed like natural formations. Ships the size of cities uncloaked themselves. Weapons platforms that could destroy planets charged their systems. In Earth's orbit, what had looked like simple space stations opened like flowers. Each one revealed weapons and defenses that were more advanced than anything the Dominion had ever built. Chen smiled as she watched her preparations come online. The Dominion was about to learn what happened when you threatened humanity's home. Admiral, Rodriguez said, all systems are ready. The fleet is requesting permission to take positions. Tell them to wait, Chen replied. Let the Dominion come to us first. I want them to feel confident. I want them to think they're about to win an easy victory. She turned to look at Earth one more time. Soon the Dominion would arrive, expecting to find a helpless world defended by a few desperate ships. Instead, they would find something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait. Admiral Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. Through the massive viewing window, he could see Earth's solar system spread out before him. It looked exactly like their intelligence reports had described. A single, yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. Nothing special, nothing threatening. Sensors report, Commander, he ordered. Commander next studied his instruments with all four of his eyes. I'm detecting primitive orbital stations around the third planet. Some basic mining operations in the asteroid belt. A few small ships moving between planets. Nothing that poses any threat to our fleet. Korath nodded with satisfaction. The humans had probably seen his ships coming and were hiding in fear. That was normal. Most species tried to hide when they saw a Dominion punishment fleet approaching their world. His fleet was impressive. 100 ships arranged in perfect formation. Each ship was over a mile long and armed with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. The humans had never seen military power like this before. They would surrender quickly, and then the galaxy would remember what happened to those who defied the Dominion. Open a communication channel to the human homeworld, Korath commanded. Thuk, communication officer, a thin creature with tentacles for arms, worked at his console. Channel open, Admiral. Korath straightened his armor and prepared to deliver the surrender demand. But before he could speak, something strange happened. His tactical officer suddenly looked up from his instruments with confusion in his 6 eyes. Admiral, I'm getting strange readings from the asteroid belt. What kind of readings? Power signatures. Very faint, but they shouldn't be there if those are just mining operations. Korath frowned. Probably just their primitive equipment. Ignore it. He turned back to the communication channel, ready to demand Earth surrender. He opened his mouth to speak. That's when the asteroid belt exploded with light. What had looked like ordinary space rocks suddenly revealed themselves as massive battle stations. Stealth systems that had hidden them for years shut down all at once. The mining operations opened like metal flowers, revealing weapon barrels the size of buildings. Incoming fire! Screamed the tactical officer. The first shots hit Korath's fleet before anyone could react. But these weren't the energy weapons they expected. These were solid projectiles moving at incredible speeds. Chunks of metal accelerated to nearly the speed of light by magnetic forces that human science had perfected decades ago. The Dominion's shields were designed to stop energy beams and plasma bolts. They were useless against solid objects moving that fast. The projectiles punched through the shields like they weren't even there and smashed into the hulls of the ships. The ship next to Korath's flagship simply disappeared. One moment it was there, the next moment it was a cloud of expanding debris. 3 more ships died in the first 10 seconds of the attack. "Return fire," Korath roared. "All ships return fire." His fleet tried to fight back. Energy beams and missile swarms launched toward the asteroid belt. But the humans were ready for that too. Point defense systems that looked like tiny stars appeared around each battle station. The Dominion's weapons were intercepted and destroyed before they could reach their targets. "Admiral," called out the sensor officer, "I'm detecting more ships coming from behind the 4th planet." Korath spun around to look at his tactical display. New contacts were appearing on his screens. Lots of them. Ships that had been hiding behind Mars were now moving to attack his fleet from the side. But these weren't the primitive vessels his scouts had reported. These were sleek, deadly-looking craft that moved with impossible speed and precision. Their hulls seemed to bend light around them, making them hard to target. "How many ships?" Korath demanded. I count over 300, sir, and more are appearing every second." Korath felt ice in his veins. His intelligence reports had said the humans only had a few dozen ships. Where were all these vessels coming from? The answer came when his communication officer intercepted a human transmission. The voice was calm and professional, speaking in the human language called English. The translation computers quickly converted it to Dominion Standard. "Ghost Fleet Alpha, you are cleared for attack run. Phantom Squadron, take flanking positions. Shadow Wing, protect the home defense platforms. Ghost ships. Phantom Squadrons, Shadow Wings." The humans had been building a fleet in secret and hiding it from Dominion scouts for years. More of Korath's ships died. The human weapons were incredibly accurate and seemed to know exactly where to hit for maximum damage. It was like fighting an enemy who could read his mind and predict his every move. "Sir," called out the tactical officer, "the humans are using our own technology against us." "What do you mean?" "They're weapons, sir. They're based on designs from multiple species. I'm detecting Zilani plasma systems, Vorthan railguns, Keth shield-piercing technology. They've somehow combined technology from dozens of different species." Korath realized the horrible truth. Every diplomatic mission to Earth, every trade delegation, every cultural exchange. The humans had been studying alien technology and learning from it. They had taken the best ideas from every species in the galaxy and created something new and deadly. "Admiral," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it on screen." The image that appeared made Korath step backward in shock. It was a human female wearing a simple black uniform. She looked ordinary, unremarkable. But her eyes held a cold intelligence that made Korath's blood freeze. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," she said. "You came to our system uninvited. You threatened our world. You made one critical mistake." "What mistake?" Korath snarled. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You assumed we would fight fair." The human attack intensified. More ships appeared from seemingly empty space. The asteroid belt revealed more hidden weapons. Even some of the space stations orbiting Earth opened up to show massive gun batteries. Korath's fleet was being torn apart. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds were dying like insects in a fire. His proud formation was breaking up as captains tried desperately to save their vessels. "Admiral!" screamed his navigation officer. "Our escape route is blocked. Human ships have appeared behind us." Korath looked at his tactical display with growing horror. The humans had surrounded his entire fleet. This wasn't a desperate defense by a primitive world. This was a carefully planned trap, and he had walked right into it. "How long have they been planning this?" he whispered. As if she could hear him, Admiral Chen spoke again. "We've been ready for this day for over 70 years, Admiral. Ever since we first learned about the Dominion. We knew you would come eventually. We've been preparing." Half of Korath's fleet was gone. The survivors were damaged and running low on ammunition, but the human ships seemed fresh and ready to keep fighting. "Admiral," his communication officer said quietly, "Captain Voss is requesting permission to surrender." "Never!" Korath roared. "The Dominion does not surrender to primitives." But even as he said it, he knew they were beaten. The humans weren't primitives. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that had learned from their enemies and grown stronger. "Sir," the tactical officer said urgently. "Long-range sensors are detecting more human ships approaching from outside the system. Hundreds of them." Korath felt his heart sink. If this was just Earth's local defense force, how many ships did the humans have in total? How long had they been building up their military in secret? "Admiral Chen," he said into the communication channel, I request terms for surrender." The human woman shook her head. "No terms. You will withdraw immediately. Take your remaining ships and leave our system. Tell your council that Earth is not interested in joining their empire." "And if we refuse?" Chen's expression didn't change. "Then none of your ships will leave this system alive." Korath looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him, waiting for orders. His proud fleet was broken and bleeding. The humans had defeated them completely. "All ships," he said finally. "Begin withdrawal. Maximum speed." As his surviving vessels limped away from Earth, Korath sent a desperate message back to the Dominion Council. The transmission was brief but terrifying. "This is Admiral Korath. The punishment fleet has been destroyed. Earth is not a primitive world. Repeat, Earth is not primitive. They were ready for us. They've been ready for decades. Request immediate reinforcements. This is not over." But as his damaged flagship jumped to faster-than-light speed, Korath had a terrible feeling that it was over. The humans had shown that the Dominion could be beaten. Word would spread across the galaxy. Other species would begin to hope. And somewhere in the depths of space, Admiral Chen was already preparing for the Dominion's next move. News of the Dominion's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 cities, beings who had lived their entire lives under the boot of the Dominion Council gathered around communication screens and whispered in amazement. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated a Dominion punishment fleet. On the mining world of Kepler 7, a group of Thrallan workers stopped their machines and stared at the news broadcast. Their supervisor, a cruel Dominion officer, tried to order them back to work. For the first time in 50 years, they ignored him. "Did you hear?" One worker whispered to another. "The humans destroyed 67 ships." 67. Admiral Korath himself had to run away. The supervisor raised his shock weapon but hesitated. Something had changed in the worker's eyes. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Hope. On the pleasure world of Xanadu Prime, wealthy aliens who had never known hardship suddenly found their parties interrupted by urgent news bulletins. The galaxy's most powerful military force had been humiliated by a species most of them had never heard of. Lady Vexina, a prominent Dominion supporter, threw her crystal wine glass across the room. "This is impossible. The reports must be wrong." But her guests were already checking their personal communication devices, reading the same story from dozens of different sources. The humans had not just won, they had won easily. In the deepest levels of the Dominion's capital world, in prisons that were supposed to be escape-proof, political prisoners pressed their faces against cell windows and smiled for the first time in years. The guards noticed the change in mood and called for reinforcements, but they didn't know what to do about hope. Emperor Thex stood in his private chamber, surrounded by screens showing reports from across the galaxy. His silver skin had turned almost white with rage. On every world the story was the same: the Dominion had been beaten. The humans had shown that the mighty empire could be defeated. "How is this possible?" he snarled at his advisors. "Our intelligence said they had barely 50 ships." General Vex shifted nervously on her 6 legs. "Emperor, we're receiving new reports about human activities. It seems our intelligence was incomplete." "Show me." The main screen lit up with a map of the galaxy. Red dots showed known human colonies, but as Vex input new data, more dots appeared. And more. And more. "These are confirmed human settlements," Vex explained. "We thought they only had 12 colonies. The real number appears to be over 200. Thex stared at the screen in horror. The humans weren't newcomers to the galaxy. They had been expanding for decades, quietly and secretly. They had built an empire right under the Dominion's nose. How did we miss this? They were very careful, Emperor. They chose systems that seemed worthless, places with few resources or strategic value, systems we never bothered to investigate closely. Admiral Korath, who had arrived just hours ago with the survivors of his fleet, spoke up from his position near the wall. His armor was damaged and his pride was broken. "Emperor, there's something else. The humans didn't just build ships. They built an entire hidden infrastructure. Shipyards, research stations, training facilities. This wasn't put together in a few years. This took decades of planning. Decades! Thex's voice rose to a roar. You're telling me these primitives have been preparing to fight us for decades? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Korath replied grimly. Every time we sent diplomats to Earth, they were studying us. Every cultural exchange, every trade mission, they were learning our weaknesses. General Vex brought up another display. Emperor, we have more bad news. Our agents report increased resistance activity on 17 worlds. The local populations are beginning to organize. Some are even openly defying Dominion law. Thex felt control slipping through his fingers like sand. For 1,000 years, the Dominion had ruled through fear and superior technology. But the humans had shown that the Dominion could be beaten. Now that fear was turning to hope, and hope was the most dangerous weapon of all. We need to crush this rebellion before it spreads, he declared. Assemble the Grand Fleet. Every ship, every species. I want an armada that will make the humans understand their place. How large a force, Emperor? Asked General Vex. Everything. Pull ships from patrol duties, from garrison fleets, from border defense. I want 2,000 ships. When we're done with Earth, there won't be enough left to fill a cargo container. While the Dominion planned their massive response, Admiral Chen stood in her command center deep inside Earth's moon. But she wasn't alone. The room was filled with beings from dozens of different species, all wearing the same simple black uniform of the Earth Defense Force. Major Rodriguez approached her with a datapad. Admiral, our intelligence networks report the Dominion is assembling their Grand Fleet. Current estimates suggest over 2,000 ships. Chen nodded calmly. Expected. How are our allies responding? Better than we hoped. The Altarian resistance has activated their hidden fleet. The Centauri Liberation Front is moving into position. Even some of the smaller groups are contributing ships. Chen walked to the main display, which showed a three-dimensional map of local space. Hundreds of small icons were moving toward predetermined positions. Each icon represented a fleet that had been secretly built by species the Dominion thought were completely under their control. Admiral, said Commander Yatta, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. She was from Vega 3, a world the Dominion had conquered 50 years ago. My people are asking when we reveal ourselves to the galaxy. Soon, Chen replied. But first, let the Dominion commit their full strength. I want every ship they have, in one place. The truth was more incredible than even the galaxy's wildest rumors. For over a century, humanity had been doing more than just building ships and hiding colonies. They had been secretly contacting every oppressed species in the galaxy, every world that had fallen to the Dominion, every species that had been enslaved or exploited. The humans had offered them something the galaxy had forgotten: hope. And with that hope came technology, training, and coordination. Resistance groups that had been fighting alone for decades suddenly found themselves part of a vast network spanning hundreds of worlds. Admiral, called out Lieutenant Park from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission from the Dominion Council. Emperor Thex wants to speak with you. Put him on screen. The image of Emperor Thex appeared, his silver face twisted with rage. Human, you have made a grave mistake. The Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. We will not be defeated by a race of primitives. Chen looked at him calmly. Emperor Thex, your punishment fleet failed to complete its mission. I suggest you reconsider your position. My position? Thex laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. I am assembling the largest military force in galactic history. 2,000 ships from every corner of the Empire. When they arrive at your pathetic world, you will beg for the mercy you should have accepted from the beginning. 2,000 ships. Chen repeated thoughtfully. That's impressive. Tell me, Emperor, what happens to your empire when those 2,000 ships don't come home? Thex's expression changed. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. You're bluffing. No single world could stand against the combined might of the Dominion. Chen smiled, and her expression was as cold as space itself. You're right. No single world could. But Earth isn't alone. She gestured to the beings around her. Meet my staff, Emperor. Commander Yatta from Vega 3, Lieutenant Zex from the Altair system, Major Krill from the Centauri colonies, Captain Torres from Proxima Station. Thex stared at the screen in growing horror as he realized what he was seeing. These weren't human officers. They were aliens from worlds the Dominion supposedly controlled. Impossible, he whispered. For 70 years your empire has been rotting from the inside, Chen continued. Every world you conquered, every species you enslaved. They've been waiting for someone to show them that resistance was possible. Well, Emperor, consider yourself shown. The transmission ended, leaving Thek staring at a blank screen. Around him, his advisors whispered among themselves in fear and confusion. Emperor, General Vex said quietly, if the humans have been organizing resistance movements across the galaxy, then we're not just fighting one world, Thex finished. We're fighting everyone we've ever conquered. For the first time in his long life, Emperor Thex felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Real, genuine fear that his 1,000-year empire might be about to end. But it was too late to back down now. The Grand Fleet was already assembling. Soon the largest military force in galactic history would jump to Earth's solar system. The question was, what would be waiting for them when they arrived? The Dominion Grand Fleet was the most impressive sight the galaxy had ever seen. 2,000 ships from 12 different species, arranged in perfect formation as they approached Earth's solar system. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, armed with weapons that could destroy cities and protected by shields that could withstand the heat of suns. Emperor Thex stood on the bridge of his personal dreadnought, the Galaxy's Fist. The ship was over 2 miles long and carried enough firepower to crack a planet in half. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for what they expected to be the final battle of a very short war. Report, Thex commanded. General Vex studied her tactical displays with all 6 of her eyes. Long-range sensors show the human fleet taking defensive positions around their homeworld. We count approximately 500 ships, possibly 600. Thex smiled with satisfaction. Even if the humans had been building ships in secret, they were still outnumbered 4-1. The Grand Fleet would crush them like bugs. Any sign of the resistance fleets the humans claim to have? Nothing yet, Emperor. If they exist, they're well hidden. Admiral Korath, who had been given command of the assault wing despite his previous failure, spoke up from his position near the tactical station. Emperor, I still think we should approach with more caution. The humans have surprised us before. Admiral, Thex replied coldly. You let a handful of primitive ships destroy half your fleet. I don't think we need to take tactical advice from you. Korath fell silent, but his expression remained troubled. Something felt wrong about this entire situation. The humans were acting too confident for a species facing complete destruction. As the Grand Fleet moved deeper into the solar system, strange things began to appear on their sensors. What had looked like empty space started to show faint energy readings. Asteroid fields that should have been cold and lifeless were generating power signatures. General, called out the sensor officer, I'm detecting unusual activity throughout the system. It looks like the humans have been very busy. Show me, Vex ordered. The main display lit up with a detailed scan of the solar system. Red dots marked the locations of human ships and space stations. But as the sensors probed deeper, more contacts appeared. And more. And more. By the void, whispered one of the bridge officers. They're everywhere. The truth was stunning. The humans hadn't just built a few hundred ships to defend Earth. They had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. Every planet, every moon, every large asteroid had been turned into a military installation. Mars wasn't just a colony, world. It was a massive shipyard covered with orbital defense platforms. The asteroid belt wasn't just a source of raw materials. It was a ring of hidden weapons that could destroy fleets. Even the gas giant Jupiter had been surrounded with battle stations that had been disguised as research facilities. Emperor, General Vex said quietly, our intelligence estimates were wrong, very wrong. I'm counting over 2,000 separate installations. This isn't a desperate defense. This is a fortress system that's been under construction for decades. Thex felt a chill run through his body. How many ships are we really facing? Unknown, sir. Many of these installations could be hiding entire fleets. We won't know until they reveal themselves. As if summoned by her words, space around the Grand Fleet began to change. Stealth fields that had been operating for years suddenly shut down. Cloaking devices powered off. Holographic disguises faded away. What had looked like empty space was suddenly filled with human warships. They weren't the crude primitive vessels the Dominion had expected. These ships were sleek and deadly, incorporating technology from dozens of different species. Their hulls seemed to absorb light, making them hard to target. Their weapons were unlike anything in the Dominion's databases. "Contact report," Vex shouted to her sensor officer. I'm reading over 4,000 human ships, General, and more are appearing every second." 4,000 ships. The humans had managed to hide a fleet twice the size of the Grand Fleet right under the Dominion's nose. But that wasn't the most shocking revelation. "Emperor," the communication officer called out urgently. "We're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Our garrison fleets. They're under attack." "What? By whom?" "Unknown forces, sir. But the attacking fleets are using human-style tactics and communication protocols." Vex stared at the tactical display in growing horror. Red warning lights were appearing on star systems across the galaxy. His empire was being attacked from within. "This is impossible," he breathed. "We would have detected fleet movements this large." Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main screen without warning. The human woman looked exactly the same as before, calm, professional, and completely unafraid. "Emperor Thex," she said politely. "Welcome to Sol System. I trust you're enjoying the view. How did you penetrate our communication systems?" Thex snarled. "The same way we've been penetrating your systems for the past 70 years, Chen replied. Very carefully. She gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display changed to show the entire galaxy. Thousands of red icons were moving across the map, representing fleets in motion. "Every species you've conquered over the past 1,000 years has been building ships," Chen explained. "The Altarians, the Centaurians, the Vegans, the Andromedans, hundreds of others. They've been hiding their fleets in dead systems, building them in asteroid fields, constructing them inside hollow moons." "This is impossible," Thex repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's only impossible if you assume your victims would stay victims forever," Chen said. "But oppression breeds resistance, Emperor. And resistance, when properly organized and equipped, breeds revolution." The scope of the human plan was becoming clear. For decades, they had been secretly arming and coordinating every resistance movement in the galaxy. What looked like a war between Earth and the Dominion was actually a galaxy-wide uprising that had been planned for generations. "You're not just fighting Earth," Chen continued. "You're fighting everyone you've ever wronged, every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every family you've destroyed. They've all been waiting for this moment." "General," called out the sensor officer, "our rear guard is under attack. Ships are coming out of hyperspace, all around us." The Grand Fleet, which had seemed so powerful just minutes ago, was suddenly surrounded. Ships appeared from every direction. Not just human vessels, but craft from dozens of different species, all working together with perfect coordination. "This is Admiral Chen to all resistance fleets," came the broadcast over all frequencies. "Operation Liberation is now active. Remember your training. Remember your purpose. Today we end 1,000 years of tyranny." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't just a military engagement. It was the simultaneous uprising of every oppressed species in known space. On Vega 3, hidden, resistance fighters emerged from underground bunkers and seized control of Dominion command centers. On Altair Prime, sleeper agents activated and began broadcasting calls for rebellion. On 100 worlds, resistance fleets that had been secretly built over decades suddenly appeared and began attacking Dominion installations. The Grand Fleet found itself fighting not just the human armada, but waves of ships from every corner of the galaxy. Weapons that the Dominion had never seen before tore through their supposedly impenetrable defenses. Tactics that had never been documented in their military databases confused and overwhelmed their commanders. "Emperor," General Vex shouted over, the sound of alarms. "We're receiving surrender demands from Admiral Chen." "Never," Thex roared. "The Dominion does not surrender." But even as he said it, he could see his mighty fleet being torn apart. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were dying by the dozens. His perfect formation was dissolving into chaos as captains tried desperately to save their vessels. "Sir," Admiral Korath said quietly, "we need to consider retreat." "There is no retreat," Thex snarled. "We fight to the death." "Emperor," Vex said urgently, "if we lose the entire Grand Fleet here, there won't be anything left to defend the core worlds." Thex looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him with expressions of fear and desperation. Outside, the greatest military force in galactic history was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had underestimated completely. For the first time in 1,000 years, The Dominion was losing a war. "All ships," he said finally, his voice heavy with defeat. "Begin emergency withdrawal, maximum speed." But as his surviving vessels tried to flee, they found their escape routes blocked by more resistance ships. The revolution had spread so quickly that there was nowhere left to run. The Dominion Empire, which had seemed invincible just hours ago, was crumbling from within. Emperor Thex's hands shook as he stared at the tactical display showing his crumbling empire. Red warning lights flashed across hundreds of star systems. His 1,000-year reign was ending in a matter of hours. "Report from the core worlds," he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. General Vex, her blue skin now pale with exhaustion, read from her datapad. 17 garrison fleets have surrendered. 23 more are fighting but requesting reinforcements we don't have. The Altarian sector has declared independence. The Centauri colonies are in full revolt. Thex closed his eyes. Each piece of news was like a dagger to his heart. The empire his ancestors had built over centuries was dissolving like sand in a storm. And our grand fleet? Less than 400 ships remain operational. They're scattered across 3 star systems, most heavily damaged. 400 ships. From the mighty force of 2,000 that had left to crush the humans, only 400 survived, and they were being hunted by resistance fleets that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Emperor," called out the communication officer. "We're receiving another transmission from Admiral Chen." Thex wanted to refuse to maintain his dignity in defeat, but what was the point? His empire was finished. He might as well hear what the humans had to say. "Put her on screen." Admiral Chen appeared, still wearing her simple black uniform. But now she wasn't alone. Standing beside her were beings from dozens of different species, all wearing the same uniform. Former slaves and conquered peoples now united under human leadership. "Emperor Thex," Chen said formally, "I believe it's time we discuss terms." "Terms?" Thex laughed bitterly. "What terms can there be? You've destroyed everything." "We've freed everything," Chen corrected. "There's a difference." Behind Chen, the bridge of her flagship was bustling with activity. Beings who had been enemies just hours ago now worked, side by side, coordinating the liberation of an entire galaxy. "I have a question for you, Emperor," Chen continued. "Your scouts first came to Earth over 70 years ago. They saw what they thought was a primitive world with a few small colonies. But that wasn't really what they saw, was it?" Thex frowned, not understanding where this was leading. Chen smiled. "Let me tell you what your scouts really found when they discovered humanity. They found a species that had already learned the most important lesson in the galaxy." "What lesson?" "That freedom isn't something you can give to someone else. It's something they have to take for themselves." Chen gestured to the beings around her. "Every species in this room was conquered by the Dominion. Every world we represent was enslaved. But we never stopped fighting, we never stopped hoping, we just needed someone to show us that resistance was possible." "So you united them against us?" Thex said. "We united them for themselves," Chen replied. "The difference matters." A new voice spoke up from beside Chen. It belonged to Commander Yata, the blue-skinned woman from Vega 3. "Emperor, do you remember when your forces conquered my homeworld?" Thex stared at her. He had conquered so many worlds that individual campaigns blurred together in his memory. 50 years ago, Yata continued. "Your ships arrived and demanded our surrender. When we refused, you bombarded our cities from orbit. Millions died. My family died." Her voice was calm, but her eyes held decades of pain and anger. "I was just a child then," she went on. "I hid in the ruins of my home and swore I would have revenge someday. I joined the resistance, fought in the underground for 30 years, but we were alone, scattered, hopeless." She paused, looking at Chen with something close to worship. "Then the humans found us. They didn't offer to save us. They offered to help us save ourselves. They gave us technology, training, coordination. Most importantly, they gave us hope." Similar stories came from other beings on the bridge. Tales of worlds conquered, families destroyed, species enslaved, but also stories of resistance, of never giving up, of secret preparation for this day. "You see, Emperor," Chen explained, "humanity learned something important when we first encountered the galaxy. We learned that evil only succeeds when good people do nothing. We decided to make sure good people had the means to do something." "This is all very touching," Thex said with what little dignity he had left. "But what do you want from me? Unconditional surrender?" "Actually, yes," Chen replied, "but not the kind you're thinking of. The main screen changed to show a detailed plan, not for conquest but for rebuilding. Systems of government, economic structures, judicial frameworks. It was a blueprint for transforming the galaxy from an empire built on fear into something entirely new. "We want you to surrender the idea that some species have the right to rule over others," Chen explained. "We want you to surrender the belief that might makes right. We want you to surrender the notion that the galaxy belongs to whoever can take it by force." "And what would replace it?" "Democracy," Chen said simply. "Representation. Self-determination. The crazy idea that every sentient being has the right to choose their own government." Thex stared at the plan in amazement. The humans weren't planning to replace the Dominion with their own empire. They were planning to dissolve the very concept of galactic empire entirely. "This is madness," he said. "The galaxy is too large, too diverse. There are thousands of species with different needs, different cultures, different ways of thinking. How could they possibly govern themselves together?" "The same way humanity governs itself," Chen replied. "With patience, compromise, and the understanding that differences make us stronger, not weaker." "But who would enforce the peace? Who would prevent wars between species? Who would maintain order?" "Everyone," Chen said. "And no one. That's the point of democracy, Emperor. Power belongs to the people, not to any single ruler or government." Thex fell silent, trying to process what he was hearing. Everything he had believed about governance, about order, about the natural way of things was being turned upside down. "You're asking me to surrender more than my empire," he said finally. "You're asking me to surrender my entire understanding of how the galaxy should work." "Yes," Chen agreed. "That's exactly what we're asking." The Emperor looked around his bridge at his remaining officers. These beings had served the Dominion loyally for their entire lives. They had believed in the Empire's mission, in the idea that strong species had a duty to rule over weak ones. Now they looked lost, confused, uncertain of everything they had once held sacred. "If I agree to your terms," Thex said slowly, "what happens to us? To the Dominion species? Are we to be enslaved in turn?" "You'll be invited to participate in the new galactic government as equals," Chen replied. "No revenge, no punishment, just the opportunity to help build something better. You would trust us, after everything we've done?" Chen considered this for a moment. "Trust is something that has to be earned, Emperor. But everyone deserves the chance to earn it." She leaned forward slightly. "Besides, we're going to need experienced administrators to help set up the new systems. People who understand how galactic government works, even if they've been doing it wrong." Despite everything, Thex almost smiled. The humans were offering to put their former enemies in charge of rebuilding what they had just destroyed. It was either the height of wisdom or the depth of foolishness. "Admiral Chen," he said formally, "I hereby surrender the Dominion Empire to the— What are you calling this new government?" "The Galactic Assembly," Chen replied. "Every species gets a voice, every world gets a vote." "I surrender to the Galactic Assembly," Thex continued, "and I accept your terms." Around the galaxy, the news spread even faster than the initial reports of human victory. The Dominion Empire was finished. The age of conquest was over. A new age of cooperation was beginning. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had been slaves just hours ago began the long process of learning how to be free. It wouldn't be easy. Democracy was messy, complicated, and often frustrating, but it was theirs. 6 months later, Admiral Chen stood in the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Hall, watching representatives from over 3,000 species work together to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. It was chaotic, noisy, and sometimes seemed impossible. It was also beautiful. "Admiral," Major Rodriguez approached with a datapad. "The Centauri delegation is requesting mediation in their trade dispute with the Vegan Consortium and the Altarian. Representative wants to discuss the new defense pact." Chen nodded. "Schedule the meetings, and Major, stop calling me Admiral. That war is over." "What should I call you then?" Chen looked out at the assembly hall, where former enemies debated as equals, and former slaves helped write the laws that would govern them all. "Just call me a citizen," she said. "That's all any of us are now." Outside the hall, a small monument had been erected. It bore a simple inscription in the languages of every species in the galaxy. "In memory of all who died under tyranny, and in hope for all who will live in freedom." At the bottom, in smaller letters, was a quote from Admiral Chen's final military report. "We didn't fight them alone. We just reminded the galaxy that when you stand together, no tyrant can stand against you." The age of empires was over. The age of free peoples had begun, and it had all started with a simple question. Whose armada is that? The answer had changed everything.